quick intro to Tauri 1.0, an awesome toolkit for building desktop apps with Rust. It uses the operating system web view for the frontend. You write your backend code in Rust and your frontend code in JavaScript. So very light and super fast. We learn how to code our first Rust command, hello world, a normal Rust function annotated with Tauri Command, which you add in your Tauri builder. On the front end, you just call the command with the invoke JavaScript function, which is async. You give the command name, and you get the result back. We display the information, add some logic, and now when we click the Hello World button, we get the interaction we coded. We learn about making our Tauri commands, accepting arguments as well as states, such as we can build a little counter on the Rust side and call it from the JavaScript side. And then we learn how to use the eventing system of Tauri to send messages from the Rust side to the JavaScript side. Okay, enough talking, let's start coding. So first, to get started, you need two things. One is a Rust, and second is a nodeJS, which will make the building and everything much more efficient. Once you have these two installed, you can open your terminal and do a npx, which is npm execute, and you do a create Tauri app. And then you have a little wizard to create your Tauri app. Press continue, you give your app name, you give your title of the window, and then we're going to decide which framework we want to do. Our strategy is to start simple and build up. So vanilla.js it is, that will create the application, and then we can do a code Tauri app, which is our folder. Once we are in the application, we can see that we have our source Tauri, which is going to be our Rust code, which will have the main.rs. And then on the this folder, we have our HTML files that will be bundled within the application. Everything is put together with a package.json, which is at the root, which is our node.js file. If we click on it, we see that we have the dependencies for our frontend, which will allow us to call the invoke. And then we have the dev dependencies, which is the command line utilities, which we have over there on the script. So now if we open the terminal and we do a npm install, which create our node modules, and node doesn't get bundled into your application. This is just to build your assets. And then usually you will do a npm run Tauri dev, which will start kind of a live development mode. And that will build the application, the backend, and will package a frontend inside the Rust binary. So no Node.js at runtime. And that will allow you to display what we had before. The Windows is managed by a tauri.conf.json. If we click on it, there's different sections. And if you go to the Tauri section, you have a Windows where you define your base Windows. And you can obviously override that in your builder, but that gives you a simple declarative way to put this information in. And in our case, we are going to actually make custom dimension for our windows, such as it will fit on the right side over there. So we can even add X and Y, which is weird numbers for me, but that fit into my screen over there. And then we're going to even say always on top. Now we go back and we do our npm run Tauri dev again. That will compile and boom, our Windows is on the top right, exactly where we want it to be. So we're good to go. So now we can close this file. And if we want to change the content of our HTML, we can change it to hello world, for example. But when we press on save, nothing changed. What we need to do is go to the main.rs and then press save there, and that will rebuild the application, repackage the index.html, and then we have our hello world. So that's okay, but actually, Tauri can even do better. If we go to our tauriconf.json and we go to our build section, there's two paths. One which is a dev path and one which is a this_dir. And that is where the magic is. The this_dir is what is going to be packaged at the end when you are going to build the application you want to distribute. The dev path is what is going to be used when we do our Tauri dev. And that is where things become very, very cool. Because you can say, my dev path will be an HTTP localhost on the port 8080, for example. And now that could be a little local web server that you have. And we're going to install nodeJS Servor, which will even have live reload. And then once you have that, your development can be fully hot reload. And then at the end, when you package your application, everything will take from the this_dir. And now if we go to our package.json, we're going to do in the terminal npm install server, which is going to be a local development server, which will allow us to have the hot reload. So now we can add our custom script, which is localhost, which will call the server on the folder dist. Index.html will be the home, 8080, and then the magic is -- reload. And that will allow us that every time we change an HTML, JavaScript, or whatever, the little server will send an event to the browser to reload the page. So now we go to our terminal, we do a npm run localhost. That will run our localhost. Now we're going to start a new terminal, and we're going to do our npm run Tauri dev. Now that will start our window with our web view. So now if we go to our index.html, we're going to update hello world to cool stuff, press save, and then it's get updated. Obviously we can update anything like the CSS, and we get our red border. So any files that will get updated inside dist will trigger the server backend to send a JavaScript event to the client, which will reload only the content of the web view. So the application is not fully rebuilding, it's just the content of the web view. And obviously, if we change the Rust files, we have what we had before, which is everything will get rebuilt and restarted. Okay, so let's stop that for now. And we're going to create our JavaScript frontend, and we're going to actually use TypeScript. And we're going to put that inside the source UI folder, and we're going to call it our main.ts. So very simple, we're going to just have an event on DOM content loaded, and we're just going to reset the whole body to hello from main.ts. Very simple. And now in our package.json, we are going to install TypeScript with tslib, which is needed by Rollup. We don't forget to have the -d, and we move the server as well in the dev dependencies. And then we're going to install all of the rollups. We use the plugin node resolve to be able to import node modules. And then we have our rollup plugin TypeScript. And that is what is going to compile our TypeScript and package it into one JavaScript files. Press enter. Then we're going to create our tsconfig.json. And you can get it from the source below. We're not going to go into it, but it's a simple tsconfig.json. And also our rollup.config.js, which will be the rollup file. And again, you have it in the source code below. And then once we have that, we can have our UI-build, which will just call our rollup-c, which means that it will take the config files that we just did. And that will target the this folder to put the JavaScript files over there. And then we have our UI dev, which is a little bit like Tauri dev, but we'll do for the UI side. And that will call rollup with the -c and the -w for watch. So every time we change it, it's going to recompile it. And then we also start the npm run localhost that we did before, such as we have the server that will ping the client via WebSocket when the code change. So now we do npm run UI dev that does a compile and start the localhost. And we can see that in our dist, we have the JavaScript file, and we even have the javascript.map. That would be nice. When we see errors, we can see where it is wrong in the TypeScript code. And now if we go back to our index.html, we're going to add a script tag, obviously, which will point to our app bundle. And now in our second terminal, we're going to type npm run Tauri dev, and that will be the development mode for the Rust code. That will start the application, and we have our hello from main.ts. And if we go back to our main.ts, comment out this line, press save, we have our cool stuff. Just the front end got rebuilt, not the application. So now in our demo, in our index.html, we're going to put our components. We're going to have our click for hello, we're going to see later, our counter button, which is going to be a button for add, with a counter result. By default, it's going to be a dot, and then eventually it will get updated. And then we are going to have a backend ping, which is going to be a little blue dot that will blink green on the right. Very simple. So press save. Obviously, we do not have any style, and we're going to remove our style tag, the default one. We're going to put our own file, main.css, press save. And in this tutorial, I'm not going to go too much into the CSS, so I'm just going to put the main.css. You can see it in the source code below. And now we have the UI on the right side. So we have our blink button on the top right. we have our click for hello and our add button with the result. Obviously, we click on anything, it does nothing because we haven't wired any logic yet. So now we can close the dist. We're not going to need it much. And first, we're going to focus on our main.rs, and we're going to create our first Tauri command. That will be our Tauri command for the hello world. We're going to close the left side. And then the command is just a normal function, Rust function. Hello world, it's going to return a string. So it has to return something that can be serialized into a CRD, JSON. And then we're just going to return a hello world, and it has to be on, so toString. To make it a command, you add the Tauri command attribute to the function, and then you add the function into the builder by calling the invoke handler, and you call another macro, which will take your handlers as an array. Once you have that, it will restart because we press save. Won't do anything yet because we haven't done the UI, but now on the main.ts, we're going to import invoke from the Tauri apps API. As a nostalgic trick, which is a $, is going to be our query selector. And then we're going to get the elements. And for now, it's going to be our hello element, which is our div.hello. We're using TypeScript, and we're going to get it as a HTML element. And then we're going to bind the hello click. We're going to do hello here, add event listener. We're going to use pointer up, usually is what you want now. And for our function, we're going to make it async, such as we can await. And we're going to await because the invoke method is asynchronous for good reasons. And then we invoke, and we just give as a first argument the name of the command, which is hello world. Here we're doing TypeScript, so we're going to type it a little bit to help the type hint. And then we're going to have our hello here, and the test content, we're going to have the result. And because we want to be a little bit fancy, we're going to have a timeout, which will just reset the text, such as the user can click again to see the result again. So it's going to be click again, and we're going to wait 1 second. We press save, it's already reloaded, and then we go there and press and click hello world. That's pretty cool. Now, we can do better, so we can obviously pass arguments, and we can even do state on the Rust side. So on the Rust side, to do a state, we're going to do a very boring one, which will be a counter, which will just be a mutex. So it's going to be our counter, it's going to be arc mutex of i32. Cannot be more boring. Make sure to import everything. We are going to annotate it with default. So like this is going to be simple to initialize, and it will start at 0, which is what we want anyway. Then if we go at the bottom, we're going to create another function, which is going to be add count. The first argument will be what we get from the UI side. So rather to just add 1, we are going to allow the UI to send any numbers they want, and that will be i32. And then for the state, you give an argument name, here counter, and the trick is to give the type, which will be state. The lifetime can be inferred by the compiler, so you can do like that. And then you put your type, counter, the one that we created above. And then that's it. Tauri will inject it when that will get called. That will return a string again. It could return a number as well, but this way is simple. Then we get the mutable value from our counter. We increase it by num, and we return the value. So that will increase the counter. We make sure to import state. And that is not state from CRD, but is state from Tauri, obviously. And then we're going to take the add count, and we're going to add it to our invoke handler next to the hello world. Press save, it restarts. And now the important point is to not forget to have our counter that we have here, to initialize it and to set it into the app. So to insert a state inside the application, we use manage, and we're going to do our counter default. That will create our counter. And now if we go to our main.ts, we're going to add the selector for our counter button, our selector for our counter result, and we're going to create our section that will do our counter button click. So on pointer up of the counter button, we're going to invoke exactly the same with a wait. We give the name, which is going to be add count. And the trick is that the params are name based, such as you pass it as a JSON object with the name of your arguments. So here num, and we're going to add 1. You do not pass a state, obviously, because the state is an artifact of the Rust side, and so it doesn't exist on the TypeScript, JavaScript side. And we're going to help a little bit TypeScript in this case. And now we can get our counter result element. We're going to update it. Very simple. Now, if we go on the right side, we click on our button add, and then it adds. And the state is on the Rust side again, and it's not on the JavaScript side. And if we change our num by 3, the UI refresh, but the state, because the app hasn't restarted, is still at 6. So now if we press add, we go to 9, 12, and so on. And that is pretty cool for live development. Now there's one more thing here, which is very powerful with Tauri, is the event model. So here we have seen how the client can invoke a method that is done in Rust, but you also have bidirectional event system, such as you can emit events for all of the windows, all of the web views, or for only one of them. And best of all, Tauri is built on top of Tokyo. So if we go to our Targo 2.0, we're going to add Tokyo. And now we can go to our main.rs. And one way that we're going to do it is we're going to call setup, which is called at the beginning of the application. So you get a mutable app reference. And we're going to get the app handle, which will allow us to pass it to a task. And now the way you start task, Tokyo task, is actually with Tauri async runtime, and you do a spawn. So here, for some reason, you don't spawn with Tokyo, but inside it, because it still Tokyo as an executor, you can use anything Tokyo. So here we are moving because we are going to move the app handle inside this closure. We are going to do a silly loop that will sleep for 2 seconds. And here we use the await, and the sleep is going to be from Tokyo. We don't forget to import duration. And then we're just going to print some message on the backend just to make sure that it works, sending backend ping. And the way you do it is you take your app handle, emit all. You can also emit by windows and everything, so it's very powerful. But here we're going to do a big broadcast, and we're going to say backend ping. And we can pass a message, which will be just ping. We're going to unwrap. Again, I don't like to do that, but for the demo here, we're going to do that. And don't forget to import the trait, which is a Tauri manager, to get the app handle. Still work exactly the same as before. Now it restarts from 0 because we have restarted the whole application. The blue button didn't change. We still have always blue, and we're going to fix that with our UI code. So we go to our main.ts. We're going to import from Tauri apps API event, and we'll import listen, and we're going to import event, which we are going to alias it as Tauri event to not get confused with other events. Now we have our little backend ping element over there, which is our blue dot. And we're going to listen the backend ping, and we're going to toggle it. So we listen backend ping, that is our callback. We get our inventory, which we don't really care in this example. And we're going to have our ping here, and we're going to add a class, which will be on. And then we're going to do our little timeout, where we'll remove the on flag. That will be every half a second. We're going to press save. The UI reload, and since the backend was still sending the event, now they are listened on the client side, and we see that our blue dot is blinking. And that's it. And then if we open the terminal, we see that we have all of the backend ping over there. And that is the gist of Tauri, which is pretty amazing. We're going to do quite a bit of cool demos here in this channel about Tauri, Rust, and native web components on the client side. Until next one, happy coding.